forest, whether it be ancient times or modern times, has always been a place of mystery and fear. Stories of people going missing, and stories of creatures making their way out. I was about 10 years old and was playing in my room by myself. It was around 11 p.m. My room was on the back of the house, and I had a sliding glass door in my room that led to the backyard. The blinds on the door were pulled back, when out of nowhere, the automatic spotlight behind my house turned on. I looked to the sliding glass door. Beyond my yard at the tree line, a figure slowly stepped out of the forest and started approaching my house. At first, I thought it was my neighbor, who was older than me and about the same height as the figure that was approaching my glass door. But as it got closer, I realized it was something else, and much taller. I remember it was walking towards the door slowly, almost as if it was investigating some place it had never been before. It stopped at the sliding glass door and just stared at me. It felt like an eternity passed, when in reality, it was probably only a few seconds. I was frozen with fear. I get chills just thinking about it. Only a few feet and a thin pane of glass separated me from this thing. I remember it was dark black. It had a rounded head and never blinking, oversized black eyes, and was about 6 feet tall. 2 arms, 2 legs, really skinny. The thing about it is that it was so close to me, right on the other side of the glass. There is no way I could have mistaken a human for this thing. I know what I saw. After a few seconds of staring at me, it just turned to the side and walked away, long strides. It went out of my view, and I immediately ran out of my room and screamed for my mom. She didn't believe me. I had to sleep in my room that night, knowing what I saw, and knowing no one believed me. I'm 23 now, and to this day I still get chills when I think about it. I know it wasn't a dream. I know what I saw. No one believes me. The thing that creeps me out the most was its demeanor. I remember it slowly walking up to me and walking away just as casually. That's what scares me the most. There was no rush to it. It was just watching me. This happened about 8 years ago when I was 21 and working as a camp counselor for Camp Tommy in Fishkill, New York. The place is basically a bunch of cabins in the woods on top of a mountain. Each cabin is half a mile apart from the other, so you're pretty isolated in the woods. You're supposed to stay in the cabins after 10 p.m., but as usual, at about 1 a.m., I was sneaking off to meet my camp girlfriend and was cutting through the woods to get to her cabin. Suddenly, I heard rustling in the woods and stopped to investigate it. There are bears and other animals, so I was expecting something like that. This 3-foot-tall humanoid type thing suddenly jumps out of the bushes and looks at me. It's too dark for me to make out any of its features, other than it was standing on 2 feet, had 2 arms, and basically looked like a miniature person without any features. Just solid black. I was curious what it was, so I started walking towards it, and it got spooked, bolting back into the woods. I'll never forget how mechanical it looked as it took off running. Its whole body basically shifted 90 degrees and just took off. I have never seen anything on 2 legs run that quickly. So I was pretty confused about what it was. I'm a pretty fast runner and fit person in general, but this thing was on a whole nother level of fast. As much as I try to make sense of it, I still to this day have no idea what it was. It was very human, but too short to be a normal person. I don't know how a normal human could run that fast anyway. I have no idea what it was, but maybe one day I'll go back and try to find it again. I was 15 years old when this happened to me. I was staying over at a friend's house. We were doing what most 15-year-old boys do, hanging out in his basement playing video games all night and drinking caffeine to stay up late. It was a semi-finished basement with a door that opened up to my friend's backyard. His house had neighbors on either side, but behind all the houses was a deep forest that went back for miles. So around 11 p.m., all the soda was catching up to me. I tell my friend I'm going to use the bathroom, and he says, just pee in the backyard so we don't wake up his parents. It makes sense to me, so I step out into the backyard. There's a back porch light, but other than that, it's pretty dark back there. I don't want to just pee on his lawn, so I go all the way to the edge of the yard so I can relieve myself in the woods. I'm standing there doing my thing, and honestly, it's the middle of the night and pretty dark, and I'm kind of creeping myself out. I finish and turn to head back towards the house. Suddenly, my heart drops to my stomach. As I start to step back into the yard, I hear what sounds like soft steps rustling through the leaves of the woods back into my right. I'm worried it might be an animal or something. I can feel my skin crawl with goosebumps as I turn my head over my shoulder. I've never been so scared in my life. I see a tall, skinny man standing at the edge of the woods looking at me. He turned his head slightly, and I kid you not, his eyes reflected red. I started running to the house. I get inside and lock the door. My friend looks at me confused, and I tell him, "Dude, there's a guy in the woods." We both look out the window on the door, and the guy is still standing there at the edge of the backyard in the woods. He had a black heavy trench coat and a hood pulled up over his head. From what I could see, he looked pale and almost too skinny, almost sickly, but really tall, maybe 6'5" or 6'7". We just stared at him. The red-eyed man just stood there, looking back at us. My friend and I looked at each other, and when we looked back out, the guy was gone. We were freaked out, but we figured it must have been a homeless man, so we didn't wake up his parents. We just made sure all the doors and windows were locked. The red eyes are the thing that still creeps me out. And why was he alone at night in the woods? I tried to forget it, but it wasn't until years later I heard another friend mention a similar story about a really tall man with a hood and red eyes walking through his neighborhood. I don't know what happened to him, or where he came from, or where he went, but the thought of him just lurking around the woods at night still terrifies me.